Not yet.
Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, February 20th, 2025. And about a little after 1:45. And we have Emily Byrne from the Joint Fiscal Office to talk to us about the Tobacco Settlement Fund, because we have been hearing a lot about that and requests. And I think this is a good little education moment for us all to get a primer on how it's used and not used, and if there's any money in there and all that good stuff. So Emily, take it away.
Yeah, so for the record, Emily Byrne from the Joint Fiscal Office. I'll share my little PowerPoint. I should say up at the front, right, I am not, I know enough to be dangerous, but I am not the expert on the tobacco master settlement agreement or the sort of details behind that. The Attorney General's office is really the best to talk about. If you really want to go into the weeds on the agreement itself and why we get the money, they're the best. So, but I'm more like, what's here, right? But so the Tobacco Settlement Fund, its sort of main source of revenue comes from the master settlement agreement that was agreed to by 52 states and territories in 1998 with the tobacco companies. That's, you know, supposed to be used to help reduce smoking in the US and to sort of compensate states for the healthcare costs associated with that sometimes come about when individuals smoke. So under the master settlement agreement, the tobacco manufacturers have to make annual payments to the states sort of in perpetuity, right? It's sort of so long as cigarettes are sold in the United States, the companies have to pay the states. It's not tied to how much. Has nothing to do with sales in your individual state. There's sort of, the master settlement agreement says states get a percentage of the total. I don't even know what the total is, but whatever the total is, states get a percentage of however that's calculated, and it's based on sales across the entire country. So Vermont gets like 0.4 and then like 17 other digits of a sort of big, the money like it's allocated. And so over time, that sort of ebbed and flowed between, you know, a little less than 20 million was the sort of first payment in 1999. And, you know, it's about 20 million the last couple of years, and it's kind of projected to go down as the sort of cigarette sales change over time. There is this big spike in 2008. There's sort of constant sort of settlements and looking at this master settlement agreement, I think, and there was some things were settled and closed in 1988 in 2018 that resulted in kind of a big payment, one-time payment. And that one-time set of one-time funds has been, I think the CHIN's appropriation that happened in 2018 is sort of where that source of funds came from. And there has been sort of this one-time amount in the fund that's been spent down over time, which is important when we get to sort of where we're at these days. So the sort of first snapshot gives you FY24 sources and uses and the balance, and FY25 budget adjustment. So in 2024, the sort of final outcome of the tobacco settlement fund, right? We had $24 million came from the master settlement agreement. There's some interest that accrues to the fund. And then there's a sort of prior year balance of what's left over from the prior year's appropriations of $16 million. So there was like $41 million of available funds in FY 2024. And then the money got appropriated out. Most of this money goes to the Global Commitment Fund and is used to match federal dollars to pay for the Medicaid program. And I don't know that we have time, and I don't know off the top of my head sort of the details around each of these remaining line items. I think those are good questions when you get to those budgets specifically, right? But like the Attorney General's office is doing on the actual agreement and making sure that the state gets the right amount of money, those sorts of things. I can't remember what happens at education. But again, so substance use things, sort of things that are related. And then there was Act 185, which had some additional spending from the tobacco fund. Act 185 was the big bill in 2025, I believe. Or no, that was before that. Anyway, that was the budget adjustment, I think. Anyway.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, a couple other appropriations have come out. And then that last line on 2018 Act 11 appropriations, this is sort of what gets talked about as the CHIN money, right? So there were appropriations made, and those appropriations were meant to go over multiple years. right? So you have to assume that sort of one-time money that was appropriated in 2018 is obligated, right? For all intents and purposes. So total appropriations were $25 million. That leaves $15.4 million, $15.5 million in the tobacco settlement fund at the end of FY '24. When we bring that forward into 2025, we have $20 million coming from the master settlement agreement. In 2025, the appropriations are mostly the same, a few tweaks here and there. The Act 11 appropriations, the CHINS appropriation is at $3.2 million. That's sort of what's left, right? So it won't necessarily all be spent in this year, but you have to sort of assume it's obligated because the intent of that law is that it's spent over multiple years. So you sort of say like, okay, that money is set aside for a specific purpose. The legislature makes a policy change, right? But that money is obligated. That leaves, so the total appropriations are $28 million. That leaves $7.3 million in the fund at the end of, projected at the end of FY '25.
Did you just say, and I missed it, why the CHINS money went up so high?
So that is more of a reflection of it. We probably, I don't want to speak necessarily for what the sort of cash flow will be, but the sort of you have to make the assumption that you have appropriated, the legislature has appropriated that money and it is spent, whether or not it's spent in '25 or in future years.
Right.
You have to, like, you think about it as that, like, you kind of the box around it and it's obligated, right? So, and like, they may.
It's a big increase from 24 to.
Yes, and the 24 number reflects like what was actually spent of that appropriation.
Oh, I see.
So the delta is like what's left,
Okay.
right? And we don't know what fiscal year it will go out, but for like understanding what's available in the fund,
Okay.
right? That money is obligated until you change Act 11, right? It is what it is, right? So that leaves $7.3 million at the end of it, projected at the end of FY '25. Then we'll go to the next slide, which sort of shows 26 compared to 25. So the 25 column is the same, right? We have that 7.3 at the bottom line, on the bottom line at the end of FY '25. We only get $18 million from the master settlement, or is projected for the master settlement agreement in FY '26. You use the 7.3 on the bottom line. That's $25.9 million worth of revenue, worth sources to the fund. And you have $24 million worth of uses, which leaves you with $1.4 million on the bottom line, projected at the end of FY '26. So the important thing to think about here, right, is that in this construct, there's $7.3 million effectively of one-time money prior year balance that's balancing the tobacco fund in 2026. So I think we've all been doing this long enough to know what that means for 2027, right? So.
Parentheses. So, but the global commitment has never changed.
No, that usually just stays as like it's an assumed amount that's going to Medicaid. It could change, you could reduce it, but you would need to find match.
We'll have to
Right.
find other general fund documents.
Right, but if there's no money in here, then we're gonna have to find it. So.
Yes. Yes, and that's the same with all of these appropriations, right? If you still wanted to continue doing them, you would need to find funding elsewhere if it doesn't come from the tobacco fund. So, right, the sort of punchline in terms of like, there's no money here. In FY '27, the projected revenue is 18.6 million. That's a combination of 17 million from the settlement and this 1.4 million, that's prior year balance. I think there's a question.
Do we know what the Attorney General's money in the education services, which money funds go towards?
The education ones I need to look into. The Attorney General ones are the staff at the Attorney General's office that sort of manage the master settlement agreement, right? Make sure that we get our correct payment.
The AG's office will be in next week, so we can also add.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the education services is, whatever prevention programs is
believe
what
so.
I expect it is.
Yeah, I can check into that one.
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Curious.
But we don't have it confirmed. We just think that that's what it is.
Yeah. So, right, looks like we're gonna have 18.6 approximately between prior year balance and the settlement, the projected amount that will come in FY '27. In 26, we had base appropriations of $24 million. So that puts the projected balance in the tobacco fund at the end of FY 27 at negative $5.8 million. So any changes in appropriations that happen in 26 will impact what's available on the bottom line that will pull forward into 27.
So this is less and less of the piggy bank that I think has been assumed by a lot of people. This is really helpful to see.
I think you answered this. I'm just getting myself a little confused.
Yeah.
So the global commitment part, this is going from the tobacco fund to global commitment where it is matched.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
okay, so there's 21 million. Okay, got it. That's,
And it's matched to help with Medicaid.
Mhm. Yep, so if you look at that, the mixing bowl appropriation, B301, there'll be a bunch of general fund and then tobacco funds and other special funds. And then that's what gets matched with federal funds
so,
into the pool.
but so the projection for 27 is less than the amount.
Right.
Yeah.
We will have to make
Yeah,
changes
right.
unless we want to run a deficit, and we don't really like running deficits in special funds, right? It's, yeah, so,
This is not one that's gonna get filled. It's even trying.
well, it could get filled, but there still wouldn't, we have to change our appropriation amounts in order for it to stay in the black. It'll get filled for the following year. There's gonna be 18 million, right? So we have to cut our appropriations, what's gonna happen.
Right,
Presumably
presumably,
the next year, but we don't, I mean, the whole goal of this thing is, right, fewer people are gonna smoke, so one presumes that's good news, right? That's what's happening.
And if I may.
Yeah.
To Vermont's credit, the money, the suit was won, I believe, part because states claimed, and rightfully so, that they had extra expenses in their Medicaid program. And they were looking for help pay back. And we've been using the bulk of that money to help with Medicaid expenses. And obviously some prevention efforts as well. So,
So they all tie to each other.
yeah, I think some say we spent it wherever.
Yeah,
Um,
John.
So if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick explanation again of the Act 11 appropriations. So Act 11
yes,
passed to
and this is
to fill in the blank.
this is why I wish Maria didn't have a cough and was in here. She knows more about it, but it gets talked about as the CHINS money,
That's what it is.
the CHINS money. Yeah, and just as a,
Child,
I should
I
remember.
think
No,
the first
CHIMS.
child
sorry, you know what it stands for?
child health insurance program.
No.
It's something like something.
There's a justice in the courts that's funded with this money and a couple other things. And I don't know it off the top of my head, but that's the, but yeah, so it was appropriated and there was a language, I believe, in the budget last year that said like this money was,
Need of care or supervision.
here we go. I believe there was language in the budget that sort of acknowledged that like the intent of Act 11 was that like this money be used until it is empty for this purpose, right? And so it will get spent down over time, right? So that might like, so if we look at this next year, the FY 25 actuals would have what's actually spent from that line. And then you would have like, this is what's remaining to be spent for this intended purpose that's already been established.
Right, so in 24, it's less than $1 million. 3
Yeah.
was projected to go to
Zero eventually, yeah. And it's right like that, what happens with that program when this money is fully expended will be a legislative decision.
Right. Right, so we will be dealing with this maybe next year. Because FY 27 budget is next year.
correct.
That makes this year look easy.
Yeah.
And it's not,
No,
right?
it's not.
So the CHINS money flows through agency human services?
Part of it goes to the judiciary and I don't remember off the top of my head. I can get more money on that for you, more information on that. Great.
Thank you.
All right. Emily, thank you very much. And Emily will be around. If people have other questions after they think about it. And now we have the Land Use Review Board. LURB being the, maybe unfortunate acronym. Thanks, Emily. So whoever wants to come up, and we have somebody on Zoom apparently also. And you have not been here this year. So we will, sorry, I'm just trying to get our agenda so I can see. Is Peter the person who's on Zoom by any chance?
We don't have anybody on Zoom. We're
You don't?
we're all here
We're
in
all
person.
three here, yeah. I'm Rachel Lamonica.
Okay, Rachel, Peter, and Janet are here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, why don't we go around and introduce ourselves, and then you can introduce yourselves and tell us about your budget.
Good afternoon, I'm Dave Yakavoni from Morrisville, and I represent the Lamoille, Washington District. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, welcome. John Kosenska from Burke. I represent the Essex Caledonia District.
Hi, Mike Nigro, I represent Bennington and Powell.
Stevens from Waterbury, representing the Washington Chip.
Good afternoon, Jim Harrison, and I represent Chittenden, Mendon, Johnson, Pittsfield.
And I'm Robin Shy, and I'm from Middlebury.
Good Bloomley from Burlington.
Travis Squirrel, Jericho and Underhill.
Wayne Rush, Highgate, Franklin, Richford, and Berkshire.
Hi, I'm Mike Morrissey, and I represent Wyndham Ford, Putney, Dumps.
Next to Mike is Lynn Dickinson, who from St. Albans Town. I think she's not. So that's us. Who are you?
I'm Janet Hurley, the new chair of the Land Use Review Board. I hail from Bennington County. Previously, I was a planner with the Bennington County Regional Commission, and before that, the planning director and zoning administrator in Manchester for 8 years. So.
I'm Pete Gill. I'm the executive director for the Land Use Review Board. I've been with the board as executive director for the past 2+ years. And prior to that, I was with the board as an attorney for about 8, with a brief stint at Norwich University. Pass it over to Rachel.
And I'm Rachel Lamonaco. I'm the business director for the Land Use Review Board. And thank you for having us today.
Great.
I think we should be all set, and it looks like you all have handouts. I have additional copies if you need them, but it looks like
I think
you're all
we
set.
have
Great.
what you have. Thank you.
So we're gonna go through several slides today. This is a fairly long presentation, but we're only gonna go through the first few slides, stopping at the FY25 to FY26 crosswalk. The remainder of the slides are really included for, you know, a complete presentation for the online component of the submission.
Thank you.
So I'll hand it to Pete for our FY26 highlights.
Great. So I'll give you a couple of highlights here. As you noted, Chair, at the beginning, there's a lot of new members here, and there's a lot of new members over here. We've got a new name and some new members to the Land Use Review Board under Act 181. The Natural Resources Board transitioned to the Land Use Review Board. We are responsible for the Act 250 permitting process for subdivision and development permits throughout the state, issuing about anywhere from 350 to 400 land use permits in a year. We've got now with the Land Use Review Board, a full-time professional board, whereas we used to have one full-time chair with 4 volunteer appointed members to that board. So a big shift in our overall governance. And as you may have noted, looking at our budget, a big shift to our overall budget as well, and kind of the structure there. The duties of this Land Use Review Board include review of the regional plans, which were previously not reviewed by anyone. Now they have an approval process through Land Use Review Board. They're also going to be looking at applications for Tier 1A areas. These are going to be areas in the downtowns that are going to be exempt from Act 250 for development, residential, commercial purposes. They're going to be looking at regional plans and the future land use maps that are going to be designating the various tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3, that will all have different jurisdictional thresholds for Act 250 purposes. So they've got a lot of work ahead of them as a board. We're a pretty slim crew. We've got about 34 people on our ship, with including 2 limited service positions that we'll get into a little bit more in our presentation. We've got 9 different districts throughout the state. They're the ones with volunteer district commissions that are actually on the ground reviewing land use permit applications. And then I just wanted to highlight, just going forward here, you've looked at our budget. It's a total budget of about 5.3. This is a significant shift from previous years, given our change in governance structure is kind of the main reason for that. And we've, because of exemptions that are part of this whole process, we've also done kind of a shift in terms of our general fund appropriation versus our special fund projected amounts. There, we are anticipating that funds to our special fund, which were from permits, will be down about 1.6 million, given these exemption areas.
Question for you. When did you become sort of fully operational as the LURB? Name change aside, because I know we had to do a little name change, but when?
Yeah,
when did you actually get to?
January 27th.
That's so you've been going for 3 weeks now.
Yeah, 3.5.
Okay. So it's a little too early to say how's it going, I guess, but.
It's going great.
Good news.
Thank you.
Could be better. Yeah, we are very pleased to have these 5 new members at the helm. They've got great expertise, and I think in terms of land use direction for the state, it is very positive to have people with these expertise and diversity of experience.
Right, complementary. You know, we have a lawyer, we have an engineer who was also a district coordinator, and 3 planners. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next slide. So I mentioned the limited term service positions, the ARPA funded positions. We have 2 district coordinators, again, the ones that are helping the permitting process, as well as determining whether somebody needs a permit or doesn't need a permit. They do that through a jurisdictional opinion. We've got my position, the executive director position, is also an ARPA funded position. However, I'll just note here, we'll get more into detail on this later. My position was included within the budget, the executive director position, but the 2 ARPA funded coordinator positions are not included in the governor's proposed budget. And I will just say, just briefly here, the 2 district coordinator positions have been a phenomenal resource for our program. They've been incredibly critical to it. And I'll just share one quick story. As Janet was saying, one of our board members is now on the board, but she was the district coordinator for District 7, which is the Northeast Kingdom. And we are very thankful to have her on the board, but it did leave a void in our district staff and an ability to implement the permitting processes. And we were able to take our ARPA funded position and put one of those into that temporarily to help continue services in that district. And that's been very helpful. We've had to backfill a little bit with others as well. But it's been very helpful to keep that continuity of services because of that.
So I just want to clarify. The governor's budget doesn't include the 2 limited service positions that you're talking about.
Correct.
But it does include you as the executive director.
Yes.
That's what previously are.
Previously ARPA funded. And with that, I'm going to transition over to Rachel on the scanning project, another ARPA funded.
I just want to let you know, we have a hard stop at 2:30 because we have another group coming in, so. Thank you.
Very briefly, the Natural Resources Board, our former namesake, was awarded a one-time ARPA appropriation several years ago. That money is transferred now to the Land Use Review Board to complete a scanning project of our land use permit records. So historic Act 250 permit records in two of our district offices, District 4 in Chittenden County, and then District 7 in the Northeast Kingdom are the two areas that we're focusing on right now. Pretty simply, the goals of that project are to make those records readily available to the public, to permanently preserve our records with the goal of shipping our hard copy files to the state archives in Middlesex at the end of this project for permanent, retention there. And to reduce our storage space in our district offices long-term, with that transfer of those hard copy records. All of that funding has been fully obligated. Records are currently being digitized. We're getting great feedback about it. And we have yet another shipment going out at the end of the month, so it feels great. So that project is on track to expend that funding by the and state deadlines associated with that funding source. Carry forward funds, we tend to have a very small amount of carry forward from year to year. Last year, between transitioning from FY24 to FY25, we had just over 37,000 in carry forward funding. We were not appropriated funding to really look at the operational aspects of having several new board members. So really we applied all of that carry forward funding to equipment, materials, licenses to stand up operations for all of those new board members. In addition to that, all of our commissions were have new requirements that they need to meet associated with the open meeting law. So we've outfitted all of those commissions with the equipment they need to facilitate that process and trained everyone to complete that work. Hand it back to you, Pete.
Yeah, just to say a little bit more about two items that are beyond the governor's recommend. The first is the two district coordinator positions that I was talking about before. Our request here is that that these would be funded through fiscal year 2029. That would allow and align well with under Act 181, the request that the board come back with a study that looks, among other things, how is 181 implementation going, including staffing levels, et cetera. And this would be a good time to be looking back at those needs at that point. But as I mentioned before, I mean, it's really been critical. I know that there are permittees, applicants that are out there wondering what is going to happen December 31st, 2025, if those positions are not filled.
So you're funded through the end of this calendar year?
Yes. Yes. And then the second is what Rachel was alluding to, just making sure that we have digital information infrastructure to be able to support the requirements of the Land Use Review Board in terms of intaking, mapping and plans, so that it can be a public-facing process, so that folks understand and can see what decisions are being made by the board on the land use side.
So is this the first stage of a longer-term project or an IT project, or I'm just sort of a little confused as to what?
We have an existing database that works with our Act 250 permitting process. We think this amount of money would allow us to expand that database to also serve the board. So building off existing infrastructure and existing IT projects that we've completed and are successful. But there are storage space costs for digital infrastructure, as well as we'll be hosting, perhaps an online atlas to display this information. So members of the public or different projects could understand what's approved in their project area. And maintaining that infrastructure long-term is, really standing it up is one thing, maintaining it over the long term is another.
So does this something that has to go through ADS, the Agency of Digital Services?
Yes, and we're already talking with the Agency of Digital Services about this work, as well as the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, kind of coordinating our pieces and their pieces to present all of this in one-stop shop, kind of
Efficiently.
efficiently as possible.
Okay, thank you.
It's to support all the new duties that the board has.
For approving regional plans and future land use maps and tier 1A applications.
Did ADS give you this $100,000 estimate, or where did that come from?
So they are working on finalizing the exact dollar amount. This is an estimate that we believe, based on other projects that we've done with ADS, that it would be around this figure. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, this is performance measures. I'll just note here that all those the first three bars there are all well within our historic range in terms of how many appeals we have, how quickly we are completing our applications, and then the total number of permits that we're issuing. The big change there is the bottom line is jurisdictional opinions. That has increased over time and is continuing to increase. These are, again, duties of the district coordinators to issue those jurisdictional opinions, and that has increased.
So give us an example of what a jurisdictional opinion is.
Yeah, so it's simply put, it's do you need a permit or do you not need a permit? Do you fall within one of more than 26 different exemptions under the Act, or do you fall, within our jurisdiction based on the number of units, the acreage of your commercial project, the number of subdivisions, et cetera?
Okay, so not necessarily really complicated.
It can be much more complicated than you might imagine, not to get into too much detail on it. But yeah, a litany of different exemptions that may or may not apply to any given project. Now we have 8 different interim housing exemptions, and so trying to figure out how those apply. And then on top of that, we also have material change jurisdiction. So if you already had a permit on your property and now do you need a permit for the subsequent work that you're doing? That can also take a lot of file research, looking back to see, one, whether there is a permit on the property, and some of that is in paper form. Part of our budget includes scanning. And that is one way that we're trying to open our process to the public so that you can see those permits, but it also has an efficiency on our side as well, so that the money that this committee and the legislature has given towards that scanning project has been very helpful.
You convinced me it's not just a yes or no phone call.
Yeah.
Wayne, did you have a question?
Yeah, just asking it with your additional request, was Governor's Office aware that you're going to make additional requests?
I think they are aware of that, yes.
Okay. Oh, ups and downs.
And here we are at the crosswalk. So I think at this point, and knowing that you have a hard stop at 2:30, I guess I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, a lot of this is sort of standard, right? And some things are moving to general fund because we've got a change in organization. So it's a little bit apples and oranges this year, and next year we'd expect to see something that would be more, less dramatic. maybe.
That's different than the year.
Less different. And this isn't really.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
different. Right, exactly. So, anybody, they all look like the standard things that we see.
What's the new position?
That's correct.
Right. And you put them in for funding them 100% through June of 2029.
No.
Or they're not.
Those are not-
This
those are not-
this is the governor's recommend.
Yeah.
And then the other two
Yeah.
items, so.
Can you refresh us, the board went from basically, but we had one full-time
Yep.
person, what do we have now?
5.
5 full-time.
Yeah.
That's the difference in salaries.
Yeah, there were 6 new positions created in Act 181. 4 board members, an executive director position was made permanent. That was previously funded with ARPA as a limited service position and ARPA funded. And the third is a staff attorney position, or I'm sorry. Yeah, the 6th is staff attorney position. So that is why you see such a significant increase in our personnel services.
So the district coordinators we still have, I assume most of their role is the same, other than they've got a lot more questions about some of the different tiers and whatnot. Who do they report to?
They report to the executive director, which was just, historically was a position that existed for quite some time in the board's history, was eliminated maybe 4 years ago, something like in that range, and then was brought back on through the ARPA funding. And now the request is to, within the governor's budget, to keep that position fully funded.
And is it part of the reason for this change to be able to turn things around more quickly, make better decisions, maybe with fewer appeals, so we don't have projects being dragged out for longer periods of time, because you have the expertise to deal with a lot of those things right from the get-go, and the time, because that's your job.
Yeah, that and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think overall the structure and the funding that's going with it is going to help with the operational side of the program. And then it is also going to help with the implementation of Act 181 and all those duties.
Any questions? Everybody said, Trevor, is this yours?
Yeah.
Okay, and you,
Yeah.
you all know each other, so Trevor's our liaison committee members if we have other questions. Great, we really appreciate you coming in. Congratulations, welcome to your new positions. We'll look forward to hearing how it's going after you've been in more than 3 weeks. Thank you.
Be back. Thank you for your consideration.
Next up, we have the Veterans Home, and they are all on Zoom. We didn't make them come up from Bennington again. So. Hello, Melissa.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. So I think we have stuff on our page that Erin handed things out to people who like things handed out.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think if you want to reintroduce yourselves again for the record, since this is new testimony, and then we can take it away. Thanks.
Do you want me to have all members of the Vets Home introduce themselves?
If you're going to speak, yes, please.
Okay. I am Melissa Jackson. I am the CEO of the Vermont Veterans Home. I will pass it off to Asa.
Hi, I am Asa Whitcomb, the Chief Operating Officer of the Veterans Home.
And
Steve.
I'm Steve McClafferty. I'm the Finance Director here at the Vermont Veterans Home. And I'm Mr. DeGasta.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary DeGasta, President of the Board of Trustees.
Great. Well, welcome to all of you. And isn't it nice we have Zoom so you don't have to drive up?
Yes, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to testify this way. All right, so we will start with the PowerPoint presentation. I do believe that there's some new members on the committee, so I'm going to do a brief history of who we are and what we do.
Okay, so Melissa, you were here for budget adjustment, so you probably talked about some of that. And I'll just remind you, we have a hard stop at 3 for the next group, so just however you want to use your time. I want to let you know that. Thank you.
All right, so on page 2, just really quickly, what we do, why we do it. We are here to fulfill the promise, taking care of Vermont's veterans, their spouses, and Gold Star parents. This is their home. We have a great residential campus. Slide 3 tells you that we've been here since 1884. We are an agency of the state of Vermont. I've been doing this for almost 15 years, and I'm asked that question every year. Are you part of the VA or are you part of the state? So we are an agency of the state of Vermont with state employees who follow the collective bargaining agreement with VSEA. Slide 4 is really important, I think, for people to understand what is a state veterans home and how is it different than a nursing home. So state veterans homes are facilities that are owned, operated, and managed by state government. So to participate, you have to be a state agency, and we enter into a sharing agreement, provider agreement with the VA. We are not part of the VA. So the next slide is entitled VA reimbursement. And this is important because only state veterans homes receive this reimbursement. We receive 2 types. One is a basic per diem and one is full cost of care. So a basic per diem is paid for each veteran who's in our facility, either on our nursing home side or our domiciliary side. The DOM is referred to residential care level 3 in the state of Vermont. The 2 daily rates, it's $144.10 for the nursing home and $62.20 for the DOM. These are given to residents who are less than 70% service-connected disabled. And then the remainder of these individuals' care are Medicare, Medicaid, private pay, and long-term care insurance. And the DOM is strictly done via private funds. So the full cost of care is important, which is on page 8. And that's for any veteran who the VA determines is 70% or more service-connected disabled. And they made it really easy for us this year. They pay us $555.55 per veteran per day. So of course, if you walk into a nursing home or a veteran's home, you're going to see veterans using a walker or in a wheelchair or needing a lot of assistance. So one would assume that everybody should fall into the 70% or more service-connected category, and they do not. So to qualify to be 70% or more service-connected disabled, the reason that you are at the Vermont Veterans Home, your illness or disability must tie directly back to your time of service. Now with the opening of the PACT Act, we're going to start seeing some more residents be eligible for that. With our Vietnam vets, it's usually Agent Orange exposure or cancer, ALS. But just because someone's in a wheelchair does not necessarily mean the VA is paying for their full cost of care. Any questions on that?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. All right. So we generate $2,607,000 from the VA stipend. That's what we're planning for FY26. The DOM stipend, we're anticipating an income of $136,000. And then the service connected, we're anticipating $4.8 million in revenue.
Those all say per day. Oh, it's 55. It's
yeah.
Now it's per day, and then the other is annual. Got it. Okay.
Sorry. The following slide gives you an overview of who we are, what we do in terms of services. We do your traditional long-term care, short-term rehab, hospice care, respite care, outpatient rehab, hospice care. We have an internationally recognized memory care program that started at the Veterans Home. It's called Namaste. And later on, at the very end, when you can't sleep at night, towards the end of the presentation, there was a letter. 2 of our staff members were invited to London to present at the International Namaste program because this program has gone international. So. Great. All right, other performance measures. Pinnacle. Pinnacle is a nationally recognized quality organization. They interview nursing home residents across the country. They do 1/12 of our population every month, and they ask them questions. And consistently, I think every year since I've been testifying here, we once again have achieved above national average in all the areas that you see on slide 12 to the right. The red line is the national average. Blue line is best in class, and then the purple line is Vermont Veterans Home. So the feedback from our family and our residents is our staff continues to provide care and services far above what the national average is. Slide 13 just gives you some more information on those performance measures. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of why we're here. So as we go forward, there's going to look like there's a big skew in our request from previous years to this year. After much back and forth conversation with finance and management and my numerous years of coming back and seeing you guys at budget adjustment, we have finally decided to come in with a, as we're calling it, an all-in budget and not having to come back for budget adjustment. So you're going to see that our general fund request looks substantially larger this year than last year. But if you were to take the initial budget request and then add our budget adjustment request, these numbers wouldn't be quite so skewed.
Exactly. Okay, we have a question here.
So, Melissa, related to that, if you assume that the BAA numbers are enacted, how does fiscal year 26 compare to fiscal year 25 with the BAA being approved?
I see Steve doing some moving and he'll look. When we've looked at it in the past, it's been pretty much right on in terms of, the general fund request has been around a little less than 10 million. So, but we can give you percentages. Go ahead, Stephen, if you have that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Steve McClafferty, as compared to the budget adjustment request for 25, it is a decrease of approximately, I'm going to roughly say 2.5 million. And of that 2.5 million, 1.6 was one-time monies coming back to us.
Okay, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, another question here.
Just to put it another way, the total funds, if you looked at your total funds column, the last couple of years, as I recall, they were all about $31 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we're trying to make this work the way it's supposed to work. So great. Yay.
Not that we don't like seeing you twice a year. We just want to do it once.
Yes, we knew there would be this, it's not a cliff, it's a hill.
Okay. So this year's general fund request is $10,033,214, which is 32.4% of our expenses, which you can see on page 15. Slide 16 talks about the rebasing, which I kind of jumped the gun on, but that's why we're here. And then slide 17 is a visual, and slide 18 gets into more information about our fixed and variable costs. As I mentioned, each and every year, most of our budget is fixed costs, 66% being salaries and benefits, Medicaid tax, utilities, and state allocations. By state allocations, this is where we pay for HR services, IT services, those type of things that we have no control over. The things we have minimal control over are food and other supplies, but we're in a very interesting time right now. Most of our PPE comes from China, I'm watching very closely with my staff what, if any, impact tariffs are going to have on our supplies. Let's not even talk about what eggs are costing. So we are, Asa and I are in constant conversation with our department heads. If you see the slightest increase in prices, we need to know about it. We need to start tracking it. Do we need to reach out to the state and look at other vendors? But this whole situation with the tariffs has me very concerned in terms of costing. So we're watching that very, very closely.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And on the other side of things, have you had any of your federal funds frozen?
We have not. Thankfully, one of the things I am watching, and I had this conversation with Mr. DeGasta the other day, the VA funding that we receive is actually considered grant funding under federal law. So when the first executive order came through that grant funding was going to be frozen, I got very nervous, but they exempted the funding that comes to the state veterans home. So as with each new executive order, anything about grant funding, I'm watching very closely. I've had great conversations with our federal congressional delegation. I have them on speed dial if needed, but right now, knock on wood, we're good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So slide 19 talks that we collect 68 cents of every dollar, with 36% of that coming from Medicaid. We only have Vermont Medicaid now. We have no other state Medicaid. 4.3% being private pay, 1.7% being Medicare, excuse me, almost 16% being our VA service connected, almost 9% being the VA stipend, and less than 0.5% being our DOM. We only have 8 beds of the DOM care, so that's why that funding is so slow or so low. Excuse me. Slide 20 just kind of gives you a overview of the increase, and obviously the FY26 numbers are skewed because of the rebasing of the full budget. So on slide 22 talks about our strategic plan, and I just wanted to let you guys know that the board has a really robust strategic plan, but due to the healthcare worker crisis and shortage, we are not making any decisions to expand our services. It would not be fiscally responsible at this time. We are looking at partnerships. We are working with the Rutland Conservation Corps. They're leasing the land from the board, and they will be at their own cost starting a veterans incubator farm program right on our property. This will help veterans learn a farming career, hopefully bring more people into Bennington, and also help with food insecurity in the Bennington area. So we're excited about that. So as partnerships arise that will not have a financial impact on us, we'll definitely consider those going forward. But right now, there's no discussion to expand any care and services at this time.
We have another question from Rep. Lewis.
Okay.
Your slide, I don't know if it's on page 20 maybe, it's the one with the total budget requests for each of the last 4 years, 23 through 26.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you get me that slide, or get us that slide with the BA added in for each of those years?
Sure.
24, 25, so that we could see it as the total funding for
of course
for each of those years.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. We can do that.
Yeah, Tom.
On that, would it be fair to you to just do that and just have it as a bar chart without understanding like why those costs changed, or why you had to come into, because they're not all the same reasons, right? There could be a dozen different reasons spread out over those years. Like this year, it could be Medicare didn't pay you back, or this year, you had less people. And I'm just curious, like, if you put those numbers together and present them, I think that would be very handy and just in a very basic way. But just, do you feel like you need to footnote why those BAA requests came in at the level that they did? Do you understand that question?
It's the same reason every year. Isn't it the same reason every year because it's a 2-year delay?
Yep.
2-year delay in the way the feds pay them back.
Okay, yeah, because that when you first started coming back 10, 12 years ago now, right, I guess is when it became a norm. I mean, it started off as, my memory was that there was a change in the number of beds you had available, there was a change in the population, there was they were just different things. But I mean, I can live with the notion that that number will represent the 2-year delay, so.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry to get complicated there for a second.
Just
Okay.
Let's follow up a little bit, because we've had this discussion. We know it's been coming in delayed 2 years, but in the budget process, instead of writing a budget with the full amount, there was always anticipating that this is going to come at the end of the year, because it comes at the very end of the year. And so they weren't putting it into the budget, and then they were coming back with the BAA to fill it out. So it wasn't being placed into the original governor's recommended budget. And it was just because of the fact, if I explained that right, if not.
exactly right. Yes, exactly right. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
All right, oh, going the wrong way on my slides here. So slide 23 just kind of gives you an idea of who's still here, and we still have a few World War II vets. They are phenomenal. Getting marriage advice from one of them about being nice. So slide 24 again is just another breakdown of the key factors for our budget request, where the major impacts of our budget are. Any questions on that one? Sorry, I'm fighting a cold.
Not seeing any. I'm sorry, you're not feeling well.
No, I just don't like clearing my throat every 5 seconds. All right, so FY26 challenges. So we do have 30 beds offline for multiple reasons. We've closed down an entire unit. That unit has some life safety issues that needs to be addressed. Really not safe to have residents there. The initial reason that we closed that unit was due to the fact that we can't hire our own staff to fill the staffing needs there. And as you see, our agency staff is running, $5-6 million, and I couldn't justify adding more agency staff and continuing to run at a deficit and increasing that deficit further.
Right.
So
And we think of them more as, you call them agency staff, we're thinking of traveling nurses.
Yes. Yep.
It's the same thing, right? And so do you have a waiting list?
We do, predominantly for our memory care unit. We're doing 3 admissions this week. We're trying to keep the census between 90 and 100. It's a little difficult because we have some rooms we can't admit into because of potential roommate issues or equipment issues. But yes, unfortunately, we do have a waiting list.
Yeah, and the 30 beds that are offline, would you have a waiting list for when those come back online?
Probably. I would think so.
Seeing nodding heads on the screen.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
The update I had yesterday was we have 62 people on the waiting list.
Thank you, Asa. Yeah.
The waiver, I don't know if you're going to get to it here, but we had been talking about money. The waiver that allows you to recoup all the money, could you explain that to the committee?
Okay, so I have like a 40,000 view understanding of the waiver. So specific questions I always suggest that they ask the Agency of Human Services. But when they put in their Medicare waivers, one of the ones they put in for us is to receive our full cost of care for our Medicaid residents. And Vermont Veterans Home is eligible for that because we are the only state-run nursing home in the state, obviously. So what that means is we receive our full cost of care. So after doing a cost report, we get reimbursed the difference. So we receive right now an interim rate of $475. And our most recent recoupment was a little over $700 a day. So that's where we get the that settlement. I did ask Steve, and I know Steve's reached out and we haven't heard back yet with all of the changes in what's going on in Washington and waivers and Medicare, that type of thing. If the AHS had any concerns about this waiver going away, we have not heard, but that is another thing that we're keeping our fingers on as well. So.
Nice.
Our biggest piece of our budget is salaries and benefits. And we continue to fight the perception that, our care should be free. And we're working on that. It's a continuing education process. I think slide 26 is really important when you look at what travelers cost us and why we don't have those 30 beds online. So the average hourly rate for a state RN is $48 an hour. Thankfully, we don't have any agency staff. But look, an LPN as a traveler is getting $76 an hour. So it's very expensive to bring in traveling staff.
Right.
But, yeah. Slide 27 goes over our budget assumptions again. I do want to let everybody know that we have had 2 successful LNA classes, one with 7 students, one with 5, all passed, and all but 1 have applied for employment at our facility. We will be offering another one in the summer. So right after COVID, we did a class and didn't get a great turnout, and now we're actually getting more applicants than we have slots. So that's a good turnaround. Getting LPNs and RNs, especially for second and third shift, is our biggest challenge, and we continue to work on that. All right. Let me see. 29 talks about some more of our cost-cutting measures. I will say that we still have some residents who need what we call one-to-one supervision, but thankfully, we don't have anyone who's on continuous 24-hour one-on-one. I mean, for many years, I talked about having one veteran who was on one-on-one, I think for the greater part of 6 or 8 years. And now it's just intermittent when behaviors need it. So we've come a long way with that. But that's still, you're paying an LNA to be with that resident to make sure that they're safe. So. All right. Any question? That's kind of that quick in a nutshell. Any specific questions? Being mindful of time.
That's great. Not seeing any questions. We had a long, lengthy conversation with you during budget adjustment as well. And so this is really helpful to see that. And I think we should ask for that, sort of being able to compare apples to apples on your budget. I think that'll help us a lot. Are you also presenting in House Government Operations and Military Affairs?
I haven't been asked yet, but every year we do.
Yeah. Okay, great. And Tom, go ahead.
We do have like a few minutes, right?
We have a couple. I want to give us a break too.
Yes,
so
of course.
That's going to depend on you.
I like breaks.
Go ahead, Tom, ask your question. It's important.
How much is it worth? So can you just give us then a nutshell description of the Board of Trustees for the board? It's a different way of governing than anything else in government. And I just want to get a refresher on and I know that Peter's not here, Peter Fagan's not here perhaps to take that on. But could you just give us an understanding of the governing board, what it does and how it interplays between us and you and how you interplay between the board and us? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you want me to do that, Gary, or would you like to do that?
Gary DeGas, the Vice President of the board. Clearly, the board is a 21-member group appointed by the governor. It owns the property in which the home is based on. We meet on a regular basis with the home and its management team. We basically are responsible primarily for the fiduciary responsibilities as well as oversight of the home and its activities. So I've been the president of the board now for seems forever, but it's only been a little over 2.5 years or so. But the board is, I think, done a pretty commendable job in overseeing the home and its activities. And we're great advocates for it. And if I may use this opportunity, I really want to thank the committee and the legislature for really considering this all-in budget. As a former VA administrator myself, to have to basically make a budget which doesn't make any sense. So to have an all-in budget seems to me the way to go. I realize it's a change, but I think in the end, there'll be benefits from the part of the state as well as the home, because it's going to make the home live within the dollars it is provided. assuming that the all-in budget is an all-in budget. Already, we've had some inklings that that budget is being reduced or being asked to be reduced, and that is not the way to have an all-in budget. So I just urge that if the all-in budget is approved, make it an all-in budget.
Thank you. I mean, it's just a different,
Yeah.
it's just a different way, and I know that there's different rules and bylaws and stringent things in the trusts about what can be done with the property, what can't be done with the property, and we don't need to understand all of that, but it does
It's
add to
unique.
the complication of understanding even what we just talked about the
Right.
reasons you chose over years to do things. It's just,
Yeah.
it's not simply the Department of Mental Health or, the Middlesex facility. It is.
Yes. You're your own unique organization. So, and we're glad you're there. So,
Yeah, and
thank
let
you
me add
very
one more
much.
comment, if I may. As pointed out, it is really unique, and there still is tremendous confusion between what the home does as a Vermont Veterans Home, thinking that it is really part of the VA. Obviously, it is not. It's a state agency, and the board gets caught up into that as well.
Yeah, sure. I bet you're good ambassadors for the organization. So great. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. And if we have any questions, Rep. LaRouche will be in touch with you. And otherwise, keep on doing your good work. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We have the Green Mountain Care Board coming in at 3.